first of all, welcome to the First Ward. This is my home. A lot of people think that's pretty nuts for me to live here. But for me, first thing I would like to say, I've been an investigator for 30 years. So I've been doing this a long time. So I'm going to tell you what my opinion is about ghosts. I don't care if you believe me or not, you can stick to your own beliefs, whatever you believe. I'm just going to tell you what I have learned in 30 years of my experiences. First of all, if you want to be a ghost hunter, the first thing you need to do is take the Hollywood out of it. Because it's not what it's like at all. You've got to take the campfire stories, all that BS out of it. Ghosts are not monsters, they're not out to get you or any of that BS. All a ghost is a human soul. And it's a human soul that has used its free will given to it by God and has chosen to stay here, whatever its reasons are. That's all a ghost is. So when you have people come up to you, I don't believe in ghosts, how do you believe in ghosts? Well, you tell them you don't believe in the human soul? Because that's what it is. You can give it a different label if you want to, but that's what it is. And that's what it's like for me being here, living with spirits too. They're just people. So I treat them like a member of the family. All the kids here, they get presents in the holidays just like everybody else. There's a boy's stocking and a girl's stocking. You know, we play music like Frank Sinatra, which we were talking about earlier, for the old guy in the basement. Things like that. Treat them like people, and you'll get a lot better responses and evidence on your investigations. Simple things that you can do. If you're sitting at the table, all you guys are sitting around a table and you got your equipment and you're running an investigation, just putting an empty chair at the table so they feel like they can sit with you can make the world of difference on an investigation. You need to start thinking like that. Getting back to the school, if you want to do any research, because I know some of you like to do research, particularly this guy over here. First Ward was later changed to the name Irving School. So if you want to look up things about the school, you have to look up First Ward and Irving. The next plot twist is Wisconsin Rapids wasn't always called Wisconsin Rapids. When this school was built, this area was Grand Rapids. So you have to look it up both ways, that way as well. So to find everything out about the school, you got to do all of that. She was built in 1896, which makes this the oldest surviving school building in Wisconsin Rapids. When they built this school, they built the school with the idea that she was going to have all of the latest and greatest that technology had to offer at that time. So this was the first school in Rapids that had things like electricity, indoor plumbing. She had coal furnaces for heat in the wintertime. And when you find the newspaper article about the opening of the school, there's even a whole paragraph in the article just talking about blinds. Why? Because they were talking about how teachers now possess the ability to adjust sunlight out of the students' eyes. That was high-tech stuff back then. Things we don't even look or even think about anymore. And any of these wooden ones like these here, these are the originals. The gold frames like this one there and the two that you see out there, those are actually pieces of the original blueprints. It's back before they had computers or anything. It's all hand-drawn. That picture above the doorway, that's what she looked like when they finished building her. That's when she still had the bell tower. The bell tower was lost in 1920. It was January 20th, 1920, real easy to remember. It was a really super cold day. So the caretaker had both coal furnaces up and running. Luckily that day he decided he was going to go home for lunch. He lived right down the street, straight out in front of us here. And on his way home, he turned around and noticed that the roof of the school was on fire. Apparently what had happened was embers from the coal furnaces had escaped up and out of the chimney and had landed on the roof and set the roof on fire. And that's when the bell tower was lost. They didn't put another bell tower back on because, unfortunately, even though this was the latest and greatest and had all electricity and all that kind of stuff in it, the school was extremely expensive for the town to run. So they did not build another tower up there. They just patched it and moved on. But an interesting little human note to that story was, and I thought it was really cute, was about how all the neighbors over here opened up their homes to the students while they put out the fire because it was so cold that day. I thought that was kind of neat. This building, when we bought it, It was literally a dump. All the windows were all broken out. The elements, there was snow in the rooms. And the previous owner had bought it and was going to turn it into a bed and breakfast. He abandoned that idea, but he had also bought all the homes around the school, the rich guy. And he started remodeling those homes and turning them into rental properties. He had his employees who were ripping all those stuff out of the old homes, just bringing it here and dumping it all inside of the building. So every classroom, every hallway, all the stairways, it was just garbage everywhere. We hauled out 18 tons of garbage out of the building. That's how bad it was when we got it. There was no electricity in the building. We didn't have plumbing. We bought it December 21st, 2010, so we were here in January with flashlights freezing our asses off. He had to go to the bathroom. We went to the gas station. So she's come a long way since then. This entrance here was actually known as the girls' entrance because it would segregate the children when they entered and left the building. This was the girls' side. Originally, she had back doors to match the front doors, but they did a remodel in 1954. And what they did that for was they wanted to add a cafeteria. Well, originally, the nurse's office and the bathrooms were in the basement. That's where they put the cafeteria, so they changed the layouts of the stairways so they could move the bathrooms in the nurse's office to the upper floors. So that's when that all changed. This is what they consider the second generation of schoolhouse. Meaning originally, schoolhouses were just single-room schools, and they would teach multiple grades within. This was the second generation, which the 4 large rooms. When this originally opened, they had all the way up to high school. And each classroom originally had 3 large chalkboards in it. Just like in this picture here, which is this classroom right over here, you can see on the back wall, still have the chalkboard, which is not there anymore. They got closets. That was all changed in 54. Because they would actually still do that, and they would teach multiple grades in a single room, and higher learning was on the second floor. But in 1920, they converted it to just kindergarten through 3rd grade because of overcrowding of the other schools. That's when they started changing that. So it wasn't until 1920 that it was kindergarten through 3rd. And that picture was taken in 1909. The biggest thing that people experience in this area is what I consider a residual type kind of haunt. A lot of people see shadows going back and forth through here. I just think that's residual energy from this being an entranceway. Because it doesn't interact with you or anything like that. It's just like a moment in time that just plays itself out over and over again. As far as like intelligent type activity in this area here, my favorite story was my first Christmas. First Christmas here, I had 12-foot ceilings. I got a big ass Christmas tree. So as I was decorating the tree, I started hearing the laughter and giggling of children. And that's when it kind of dawned on me, if there was still any kids here, they hadn't seen and or heard anything, Christmas since 1977 when the school closed. So that's when we started bringing them into Christmas, and we got the boys stocking and the girls stocking and things like that, trying to make them a part of everything. The buttons and stuff that you see in the walls between the classrooms do operate the bells. They do still work, so you might get the shit scared out of you.
Well, we know we hear a bell in the middle of the night. We know what it was.
And we'll move to the kindergarten room. One of the biggest stories that we hear from students that used to go to school here was that they would talk about the kindergarten teacher and the way she used to discipline students. She used to keep a roll of tape in her desk. If you got too mouthy, she'd rip 2 pieces of tape off that roll and put an X right over the child's mouth. The other thing she did, if you extra pissed her off, is she locked you in that closet back there. Now what's really, really interesting is I was giving a tour to a young lady who literally lives right down the street. She's a big fan of all the ghost hunting shows and stuff, so she brought her voice recorder along with her for the tour. And
was anybody in the bathroom? There was a huge bang as me and her just walked up the stairs. The bathroom was almost boom.
I heard it, but I didn't know it was.
The sign fell down.
No, I came from home there.
Oh.
Got
I
my
was
installed or slapping. I don't know. I've heard it before.
yeah, one of the more common kids in the bathroom. That would probably be my guess. But long story short, this lady came back about 2 days after she got the tour. She brought her voice recorder with her. And she's like, "You gotta hear this." She hits play on the recorder, and I hear myself giving the tour, and I tell her about how she was locked kids back here in the closet. And at that point, you hear this little boy's voice come in and say, "I didn't do it." Now, what's really strange about that is about a month after that EVP was captured, we had a paranormal team come here, and they brought their team psychic along with them. What was really interesting was when the psychic first came into the building, they hadn't had a tour or anything, they literally just got here. She walks into the kindergarten room, and the first thing she did is she walked over and opened that door. She said she didn't know why, but that door had to remain open. When she opened the door, she claimed that she could see a little boy sitting on the floor that kept telling her over and over again, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." So I thought that was pretty interesting that somebody captured an EVP and then the psychic said the exact same thing. But my absolute favorite story in this room would have been with my buddy Brian Dorn. He is an author. He writes books on the paranormal. He's also a wrestler.
That's why I recognize the name.
Pro wrestling. But he's more on the skeptical side. Anyway, he was getting ready to write a new book, so he contacted me and said, "Hey, can I come out and check out your school?" And I'm like, "Sure, come on up." So he came and he did an investigation here, me and him. And it got to be about 1:30 in the morning, and we hadn't had a single thing happen. I mean, this building was so quiet you could have heard a mouse fart. So what we decided to do was just to take a break and just sit in these chairs out there at that landing and do nothing but just listen. Well, after listening for a while, we actually started to hear knocks inside the kindergarten room. Brian looked at me, he's like, "Did you just hear that?" I said, "I sure did." He's like, "Well, let's go in there." So we come into the room, and this is what he did, and I thought it was just so awesome. He comes into the room and he goes, "If there's anybody in here, and you guys want to go outside and play, just knock on something and let me know." All of a sudden, we heard more knocks in the room. Brian looks at me and he's like, "Did you hear it again?" I said, "Yeah, I sure did." He's like, "Oh man." He's like, "All right." He goes, "If there's somebody locked in the closet back there, and you want to go outside and play too, that's fine. Everybody has the opportunity to go. All you have to do is just knock on the door and let us know, and we'll let you out." We heard knock, knock on the door. So I walked over there, I opened up the door. I came right back over here. I'm standing right next to the board right here, and Brian's standing next to me. And Brian goes, "Okay, if everybody's ready to go outside now, what I need everybody to do is to line up against the wall over here." And then we heard the sound of footsteps going across the floor, going right over to this wall. And then Brian says, "Okay, last thing. I talked to the teachers, I talked to the principal. You guys are not going to get in trouble for this. But if everybody's ready to go outside now, what I need you to do is to turn around and knock on the wall behind you as hard as you can." And then we heard knock, 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 right down the wall. And Brian, being the gentleman that he is, he actually acted like he had the kids signal file at the door and led them to the front door and then outside the yard like he was outside with the kids. And then, proceeded to get them lined back at the front door again to bring them back inside. But one of the reasons why I love that story so much is A, you talk to them like you would a real person. You talk to them in an engaging way that a child would want to respond to. The other thing that I loved about it is that he didn't use any equipment. Now, I'm not against equipment. I use equipment myself. But the problem I see a lot of teams do these days is they get the latest and greatest piece of equipment, whatever the hell it is. They come into a location, they all sit around looking at that box, waiting for it to bleep or bloop or do whatever the hell it's supposed to do, and they're not paying attention to a single goddamn thing that's going on around them. So, pay attention. The last thing that I really liked about the story is he followed through with what he promised. They responded, he acted like he did exactly that, and went outside with the kids. There's too many times when I've seen an investigation going on where the team will be like, "Hey, if you do this, we'll do that for you. And then that happens, and everybody loses their damn mind. Everybody's like, oh my God, did you see that? That was so awesome. I gotta go outside and have a cigarette. I gotta call the wife. Holy shit. And then they never do what they promised. And then you expect these ghosts to continue talking to you? That's disrespectful. You promise something, follow through with it. Just like what they do in a lot of these shows that really piss me off. You see them investigating a place where there's ghost kids. You see them bring a toy truck or a ball or something along with it. And they put it on the floor. And they all stand back with their cameras. Could you push that ball? Could you move that truck? If you were a child and somebody came into your home, you don't know who the hell they are, and they're like, here, play with this toy, come into the circle of guys, it's okay. That would be creepy. You want the ghost to interact with the toys? Sit your ass down on the floor and play with the toys yourself. Then you're more likely to have somebody come in and play with you. Just change your thinking, like you're acting with somebody who's flesh and blood with you in the room right now. Even try to make it a game if you can. If you got like the K2 meters or the ghost meters or any of those kind of things, do what I do, the Firefly game. It's real easy. Telling the kids, hey, see the light on the table, you know, let's let the firefly go up, try to catch it in your hands, and when you catch it, the lights are going to go off. You're like, the Firefly game. Something a kid is going to want to do. Don't say, hey, could you come up and touch the meter? You know, try to make it in some way that they want to interact with it. There's a lot of pieces in the building. Like I mentioned before, some are antiques, some are reproductions. These pieces over here were actually made for the lobster Frankie Frado. They were part of his mansion in Chicago. And he was friends with people like Sammy Davis Jr. was his best friend. That is a picture of Frankie and Sammy. And they were such good friends that they done pictures like this. Some of you may have heard of Rocky Marciano. He was a big boxer way back in the day. Rocky Marciano was Frankie's collection guy. You know, Frankie money, Rocky money for that. That's in the very unedited picture that you guys can see it. Oh, not on this side. Frankie money. It was the edited picture of Frankie. There's also a lot of fun pieces in the building too you might want to look out for. If you're a big geek like myself, I'm about as geeky as you can get with yourself. But there's lots of things in the building.
I noticed that earlier.
Pieces like this, props and things. Yep. So I try to find pieces that are from shows and movies and things that look like they could belong here if you're not paying attention, you know. So there's some kind of fun stuff. And that stuff's like everywhere. The display case up front, if you want to take a look at some point that's all things either myself, my team, or the school has done in over the years, magazines, newspapers, movies, books, all that kind of stuff. And over here, go this way. Ego. Ghostbusters 2.
That was the first
I know, I love that painting.
Or Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually the one most people miss.
This one?
The enchantment under the sea
The
dance
poster on the wall.
Back to the Future.
from Back to the Future.
Where the prom.
Known as the boys' entrance, this side of the building, the front door would have been here. Back door would have been there originally, not the bathroom. But once again, it's like the other side. A lot of people see that shadow activity back and forth through here. Once again, it's just residual. I don't think it's intelligent or anything like that. Nothing to worry about. Stories in this room, there's a few. We're trying to keep it quick. I think that my personal favorite thing I ever had happen to me when I was coming through this landing a couple of summers ago, and I straight out heard somebody say my name, like clear as a bell, like they were standing right here talking to me. And I like to mention that because a lot of people are like, oh my God, if you called out my name, that would freak me the fuck out, you know? No, that shows that they're intelligent, they know who I am, they're aware. To me, that's an extremely awesome experience for myself. The boys' bathroom. And I'm not trying to be political, but I really don't care what bathroom anybody uses.
That little guy geeked me out. I just came in
The
here.
other bathroom's in the corner.
Yeah.
Will creep you out even worse.
That one got me. I came in here, I jumped her. I was like,
I didn't see
I seen it earlier,
I didn't
you know.
see the one in the corner and the other one at first, and I'm standing there taking a piss, and all of a sudden like, what the hell?
This is all original to the 54 remodel, so it's all the original tile and everything, and we got all the plumbing up and running and everything.
Are these the original sinks though, or
The
the
original sinks.
I didn't know if they're reproduction, because you
Nope.
said you had to remodel pretty much everything, so.
Nope, these are the original sinks. As far as activity in the boys' room, once again, it's the shadows. Don't freak out. I just think it's the continuing of that residual energy going out the back door.
What they're used to.
Nothing to freak out about. The only thing that I've really had that I thought was kind of interesting was the first couple of years I had the building, I had a statue of a cat that used to sit right in that corner. And this being one of the first rooms I'd visit in the morning, I'd come in here and find the statue moved. Either it'd be slid further down on the shelf or sitting down on the dresser moved. I couldn't figure out the longest time why this kept happening. Until one of my friends came over and he's like, oh, I can tell you why it's happening. And I'm like, why? It's like, think about it, man. If you're a kid and you come in here and you want to look out the back window here and see outside, you got this damn statue in your way because you're about this tall. So what are you going to do? You're going to push it out of your way so you can see. And I was like, duh.
That makes sense.
You know, simple solutions. We're going to go up those stairs. Restroom. The girls' restroom is actually fairly active. Not saying that to scare anybody. The most common thing that happens in the girls' room are that you'll hear the stall door slamming in here. As far as paranormal experiences, trying to keep it down to one thing. I guess the reason why this room is probably important to me and my family would be the fact that this is the first room we ever saw an apparition in the building. Would have been this room. My mom and my aunt were sweeping and mopping the floor out there after we gotten the garbage out of here. My mom was standing about where that table is right now with the lamp. She looked into the girls' room, said she saw a little girl standing here in front of the sink. Looked like she was looking into the mirror even though there was no mirror there at the time. She was crying, turned and looked at my mother, and then disappeared. At that point, my mom turned around to my aunt to tell her what she'd seen. My aunt was standing behind my mom like, she saw the exact same thing my mother saw. So that's why this room is probably kind of special for us anyway. We'll go back out into the landing.
you noticed the character earlier.
Yep.
At first we're like, what is that thing? And also noticed the cracking. I was like,
Yep, that's
Why
the
should she
whole
say that?
time growing on it. That picture on the wall is actually a family heirloom. That's my great aunt who went to jail for murder. She killed her mother-in-law.
Wow.
Ruby. Yeah, Aunt Ruby.
This was
All the
at least
things
was
my
the in-law.
family held on to, that was the one.
that's crazy. You can almost see a resemblance. Look when you...
Yeah.
At least it was
you
the
should-
in-law.
You should see my daughter and stuff. Oh yeah. She's definitely my kid. That's all I gotta say about that. This landing here, the first 2 years I lived in the building during the winter time, this was where my bedroom was. The reason for that being that this was the only side of the building that had heat at that time, is this stairwell, because this is where all the plumbing is. Plus, from sun up to sun down, this side of the building is pretty much always in the sun, and that brick really holds on to that heat. What I can tell you about living in this space, the most common things I would experience is you hear somebody coming up the stairs. Of course, you hear the stall door slamming. And sometimes you get knocking and banging up in this stairwell over here that goes up to the attic. There was one night I was laying in bed, my bed would have been here up against this wall this way, and my computer was over here. And I woke up one night to seeing an older gentleman sitting in my chair watching me in the bed. And the craziest thing about that experience was how he appeared. He had no color to him. He was like black and white. And the way he appeared, the best way I could explain it would be like watching an old black and white film. It was the best way I could explain the way it appeared. A couple of days after that experience, I was sitting up in bed, I was on my laptop, I was probably on Facebook or something like that. And when I looked up from my laptop, almost standing exactly where you were, was the same older gentleman looking at me as I lay in the bed. Now, I'm a smoker. The last thing I like to do before I go to bed is have a cigarette. This particular night, I went out, had a cigarette, came back in, I'm coming up the stairs. All 4 pillows are off of my bed and stacked down on the stairs like this going down. It literally felt like I'd gotten in trouble like you're sleeping on the couch tonight. That's what it felt like. To keep things moving, we'll go to the blue room. Serial killer. He had a hotel just outside the Chicago area during the World Fair. And he had this hotel built with secret passageways and things into it. So he could actually come into your room and kill you, open up this trick door, drop the body, and the body go all the way down to the basement, and none of the guests were any of the wiser. Once it was finally found out what he had done, the place mysteriously caught on fire and burned down. This piece survived all that for one reason. This piece was removed from, later dubbed Murder Castle, and used against him in his murder trial. The reason that was, we all know that Holmes loved all his little secrets and trick passages and all that kind of stuff. This dresser here has 3 very nice ornate drawers on it. The faceplate on the bottom is actually a secret drawer. And that's where he stashed his knives and things in that he would torture and murder people with. Now, the interesting part of the story for me was after this was all over, as they often do in law enforcement, is, they have auctions and things and sell off unclaimed evidence and whatnot. A police officer acquired this piece and gave it to his wife as an anniversary present. I don't think he probably told her the origins. I'm thinking I scored a really cheap dresser. She's gonna love me. I'm getting some tonight. But yeah. But once they passed, the family was looking to get rid of it, and one of our antique dealers that we deal with caught wind of it and immediately turned us onto it. And my mom is into that kind of stuff, so here it is. To keep moving, we'll go into the next line. Now we're going to go into the red room.
Red room, red room, red room.
For those of you who haven't heard already, I think we probably all have heard this. This table was specially handmade for Frankie Frada, mobster. So God knows what kind of things went down at this table. Oh, another new piece.
I didn't know that.
I forgot about this one.
What'd you get?
Probably why I like this table so much.
That's
awesome.
It's probably one of the most active rooms. I'm not going to say it is the most active room because it's kind of a tie. But for some reason, this room has a lot of activity in it. Basically, anything paranormal that you can think of has been experienced in this room. Everything from, disembodied voices, EVPs, strange flashes of light anomalies, orbs, shadow people, full-blown apparitions. I mean, just everything has been experienced in this room by somebody at one point in time or another. But for me personally, this room is cool because this is the first room I ever saw an apparition in the building. And that would have been the first year I lived here. It was September. We had just finished getting all the electricity up and working. got the plumbing up and working. The next thing we were working on was heat for the wintertime so all the plumbing didn't explode. And the gas company came over and they said there was no way in hell they were going to hook up gas to this building until every single window had been taken care of first. There's 62 windows in this building that need to be replaced. It was not going to happen. So we actually came up with a compromise, and that was a board on the outside, a board on the inside, insulation in the middle. So that's what I was in here working on. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. My girlfriend was here. She stayed in the office with me. We were sleeping. And I woke up, couldn't get back to sleep, which is highly unusual for me because I like to sleep till noon. So I got up and I was trying to keep the noise down because I didn't want to wake her up. So I shut the door to the office. I shut this door and I came in here and I was working. I got down to like this window right there. And as I was working on the window, I just caught like out of the corner of my eye something going down the length of the classroom here. So I turned around to look, and what I saw was a little girl. I say a little girl, I mean a little girl because she wasn't much taller than the doorknob. She stopped right here, kind of looked back real quick, looked right at me. She reached up, grabbed the doorknob, opened the door physically opened, and then she walked out of the room. That was a morning I had to go outside and I probably smoked about a pack of cigarettes just waiting for somebody to wake up so I could tell them what the hell had happened to me. Because that's one of those experiences I try to be as skeptical as possible. When we have something like that happen, it's either I've got something in my head and I'm dying or I'm hallucinating and just crazy. I mean, you can't just say, oh, that could have been a sound outside. You know, it doesn't work that way. So, as you noticed, I've been mentioning the little girl a few times. When I did my own research on the building, if you want to make your research a little bit easier, the library here in town has 888 different newspaper articles about the building. So I went through them, starting from the earliest stuff possible, basically from the beginning and worked my way to present. I got to 1931. April 1931, I came across a newspaper article about a little girl named Betty Vanderbilt. She was a kindergarten student here. Every day after school, she would walk home. On this particular day, she stepped off the curb, was hit by a car. The car failed to stop and continued dragging Betty for another 100 feet before the guy stopped the vehicle. And by that point in time, Betty was dead. Now, why do I think the little girl here is Betty? First off, she calls herself Betty. She responds to Betty. She matches the description, height, age. And the most heartbreaking thing I've ever experienced here was one day I was down in the kindergarten room, my buddy Brian Dorn again, and we actually heard, disembodied voice, heard it with our own ears, a little girl say to us, "I only want to go home." Heartbreaking. But what I find most particularly interesting about Betty, going back to what I'm saying, that ghosts are not monsters, they're just people, you need to treat them that way. When we first got to school, there was always the stories about the little crying girl. People would see her in the yard crying and she'd disappear. They'd see her in the building or they'd see her in the windows. Always the crying little girl. Well, fast forward all these years later, by treating her like a real kid and buying her things and making her a part of things, like the blue bicycle that's down in the kindergarten room, that is there because there was a team here that captured the EVP from Betty asking for a blue bike. So you bet your sweet ass I went out and I got a blue bike. Fast forward all these years later, now Betty is always seen as the laughing little girl. The girl who likes to play with you, sit in your lap, dancing around to music and playing. You know, a lot of people when they first show up in the building, they'll hear a little girl like say, "Hello, how are you?" Things like that. Totally different. Not even the crying little girl anymore. Which shows that we can have just as much of an impact on them as they can have on us. So kind of keep those things in mind. And like how I always like to say, because I actually travel paranormal conventions, I lecture. My lecture is called Soul Searching. It's about ghost hunting. Because I don't like to call it ghost hunting, because I'm not, or any of that kind of stuff. I believe ghosts are souls. That's what we're doing. We're searching for the soul. And instead of freaking out when you have a paranormal experience and being afraid, change the way you think. What you're actually experiencing is you are seeing evidence of the eternal human soul. You know what that means? It means you have one too. And if that doesn't blow your mind and start changing the way you think about things, I don't know what will. So like, when people say you're crazy for living there, for me it's like, just like having roommates, but better because they don't eat my food. Just change the way you think. And if you keep that kind of an open mind about it, sometimes the soul you find is your own. Let's go to the attic.
I couldn't believe how hot it was up here earlier.
Yeah, the attic is my favorite spot.
Oh, it's not that hard.
No, but I mean, I was bad earlier. Yeah, it ain't bad now. Now it's actually nice up here. It's decent.
Believe it or not, the attic only served as storage area for the school, so
And a
it was
library.
never really much of a functioning part of the building.
This is so awesome up here. I love the window.
My plan at some point is once I finish the rest of the building the way I want it, then I'm going to start building my living space up here. So this is going to be a really awesome area when I'm done. I'm going to put like a library and over here, stuff like that. The attic. Where do you start with the attic? Trying to make it short. The Freemasons.
Of course.
Most of you?
I would hope so.
Anybody
In
who
this,
doesn't know who the Freemasons are, don't be afraid to say no. Okay. Trying to keep a long story short, Freemasons, way back in the day, Masons were all slaves. Well, there was this group of Masons that one day decided, hey, let's just keep things between us. Let's not tell or pass on any of our cool knowledge other than to ourselves. And after a while, they became such great Masons that they actually gained their freedom because other kings and things wanted them to come and build cathedrals and stuff for them. Like King Solomon's Temple was made by the Freemasons, for instance. The Freemasons, you've ever heard of the Illuminati? Some people associate them with all of that too. People secretly pulling the strings of the world. One thing about Freemasons that I can say is most buildings that I have been in that have been built by Freemasons usually have paranormal activity. Freemasons used a limestone foundation, which if you're into the paranormal, one of the theories is that limestone helps to fuel paranormal activity. Also, when Freemasons build a building, they always find a way to incorporate their symbolism into the architecture. If anybody knows the Freemasons, their main symbol is called the square and compass. If you Google Freemasons, it's going to be one of the first things that come up. You notice the support structure in the building here. You'll notice it's the square and compass symbol. Now, I got contacted by the Freemasons, was it 2 years ago now? I don't know how they heard, but they must have heard I was talking about them or something because I got the letter with the seal, the whole ball of wax. It was pretty awesome. And a couple of their guys came out here to talk to me. They took around and looked at the building and everything, and they verified the fact that the Freemasons did build this building, which it is rumored that the Freemasons actually built most of the original schools in this country way back in the day. And what he had to tell me was quite interesting. First of all, the school was built on the highest point in town. That was deliberate. They picked this spot because it was the highest point in town, and they said, think of it like a focal point, like a cut diamond. Okay, the next thing that he said is the supports themselves. Why are the supports so special? Why did they choose this to be their symbol in the place in the building? Is because when you normally construct a building, all of your support is from the ground up. How these supports work, when you normally build a building, all of your support is from the ground up. These supports here work like a suspension bridge. So they're actually holding the floors up from the top down like this. That's a pretty amazing feat to pull off in the 1800s. You didn't have any construction equipment or any of that kind of stuff, just guys with hand tools. and like all the angles and things that are in the roof, even with the tools we have today, trying to cut angles and making them all butt up and everything, it's a pain in the ass. But what they had said about that's deliberate too. Because they said in a normal building that people construct with all the foundation, all the strength coming from the ground up, any energy that your building is taking up out of the earth is being shot straight out the roof. With a support structure like this, any energy that's coming up to the building is then recycled back down into it. Pretty crazy stuff. I'm not saying I believe it, that's just the kind of stuff that they were telling me. And if you want to get into theories of why the place is haunted, I mean, they say besides limestone, one of the theories is natural running water. Well, the bottom of the hill that we're on is the river. Another thing people theorize is railroad tracks, a big metal rod with all that kinetic energy from the railroad trains. Well, we got the railroad tracks on that side of the building because of the paper mill. If you want to get into the 1980s poltergeist scenario, the water tower that's right over here on the corner that you see, the big one, that was the town's first cemetery until 1944. In 1944, the cemetery became crowded, so they moved the cemetery to the other side where it still exists today. When you read the documents, the guy in charge of the project said he estimated that they removed 85% of the occupants, meaning that 15% of the cemetery is still over there unknown. The biggest reason for that, though, is you also have to understand, and it's still kind of true to this day, but especially back then, headstones were a luxury of the rich. They're expensive. A lot of people couldn't afford headstones back then, so you didn't get a headstone. You got put in the ground. That's what happened. So how are they supposed to know years later, is there a person here? I don't know. And when they put in Apricot Street, which is a street running this way, they actually discovered 2 of the bodies while putting in the road. So if you want to get into that kind of stuff, you know, we could be having people coming over for parties. Who knows? But if you do any research on your own about the school, the most common stories you usually come across, especially if you go back before we ever touched this building. Yes, there are stories, haunted stories about this building long before we ever came here. This isn't something we just came up with on our own. The most common stories you would come across was about a little boy named Oscar. Oscar was a student that went to school here, and he had mental disabilities. Well, interestingly enough, that part of the story actually fits into the history of the building, because during the World War, this was one of the first schools in the country to start offering classes geared toward children with disabilities. So it does fit into the history. The story goes on to say that Oscar was being bullied by some of the boys that went to school here. And the story has 2 different endings. One version of the story states is that Oscar became very depressed and one day snuck up to the attic here and hung himself. The other version of the story says is that Oscar was brought up here by the boys that were bullying him, and they were screwing around and in the process, either intentionally or accidentally, hung Oscar. The one thing I can say about Oscar is it doesn't matter how many people believe that story, there is no documentation to prove that that story is true. It has to remain a local legend. Now, that being said, there is a little boy here at the school. He does call himself Oscar. He can be found in the attic quite a bit, but the one thing I want to say is the spirits that are here, the ghosts that are here, they can go anywhere they want. They don't just stay to one area. You could find Betty down in the basement, even though that's where the old guy is most of the time, but the old guy can come up here too. So you don't know who you're going to encounter anywhere, because they can go anywhere they want at any time of day. Just like I've heard, I don't know how many times I hear, you know, like people come here during the day and they're surprised that something happened during the day. It's like, that's a myth. That whole theory that, you know, paranormal activity is stronger at night is BS. The real truth behind that, why more reports come from the night than during the day, is because the nighttime is when everybody's winding down. That's when everybody's turning off their TVs, turning off their radios. There's not a lot of outside noise or traffic or kids playing or any of that kind of stuff. So you notice paranormal activity more. It's not that it's stronger at night. It's just when you're noticing it more because you're not being distracted by other things. So with the story of Oscar, there was a couple of theories presented to me. One person actually came up to me and said the reason why there was no documentation on Oscar was because of the time period it took place. It was handled as a suicide, and it came from the time period when if somebody in your family committed suicide, you did not talk about it. Suicide was considered a disgrace for your entire family. If somebody committed suicide, it was... So that was one thing that somebody said. Maybe possible. Another person said what really happened was it was the boys that were involved in the incident were the boys of the rich and powerful in the town at the time, like the Meade family and the Gross family, who are still in power today. And that they covered up the incident so those boys wouldn't get in trouble. It's all possible, but once again, without some kind of a paper trail, that's all it is. It's a legend. But my favorite experience that I've had in the attic, we had a team here, and we were getting responses like you would see on television. It was that good. When we pointed to a meter and said, "Make that meter go," it was going off. They had tri-field meters on this side, EMF detectors on that side. Major difference is a tri-field meter you can set to detect natural magnetic energy, where the EMF detectors pick up more of the man-made magnetic fields created by, the power lines and everything. Well, anyways, they were going off right on cue every freaking time. So their team leader, who was standing right over here, and I was sitting on the floor up against the chimney over here, and the rest of his team was sitting around this table back here. He said, "Okay, let's take like 10 minutes and not refer to the meters at all, and just see if they go off on their own and make sure this isn't something random that's happening." So he set the alarm on his wristwatch, and we continued to do other things. And the minute that alarm went off, not one time during that 10 minutes did any of the alarms go off. None of the meters, no nothing. But the second that alarm went off and he went, "Okay, that was 10 minutes. Could you make that meter go off?" The meter went right off. Same thing, they pointed to the one over here. "Can you make that one over there go off?" Went off. And this is what he did. He goes, "Well, since we're getting such great responses tonight, we all want to know about the story of Oscar. We want to know once and for all if it's true or not. Is there something that you could do to let us know?" And like at that point, one of the ladies sitting over at the table over here is pointing off in that direction over there going, "Do you see that light over there?" We all turn and look. What we see is this plastic 5-gallon work bucket that's over there. And at the time, it was sitting right here. And we see this ball of light come in. Came right over to the bucket, traveled around the top of the bucket like this, and then dropped inside of the bucket. And the light was so bright that when it dropped into the bucket, you could actually see it illuminating through the plastic of the bucket. The light went off. I jumped up, ran over to the bucket, and inside the bucket was one of the props for the haunted house that we used to do here, and it was the noose. Now, how interesting it is at a time when this guy's like, "Could you do something to let us know if it's true or not?" Ball of light shows up, takes us right to a noose. What do you do with that? So all I can say is yes, there is a little boy here named Oscar. I can't tell you exactly how he died, but that is the running theory, and I don't know. Take it or leave it. And with that, we're going to go all the way down to the base from that. They would heat up this piece, on the stove and get it nice and hot. And what you would do is you put your clothing on this, and when you wanted ruffles, so you wanted ruffles on your sleeves,
Oh my god.
and you'd actually put ruffles right into it.
Cool.
Interesting.
And you don't see one of those every day.
No.
You see the irons all the time, but you never usually see these. So this would be my dining room kitchen, which everybody already knows that part. So this would have been original 54, the remodel. Obviously it's got like touches and stuff too. As far as activity, kitchen area, two most common things I can say about the kitchen is sometimes when you're in here and you're like making food and stuff, sometimes you'll get a knock at this door here, which these would have been the two half doors that they would open up at lunchtime. The kids could come up and get their food and leave their dirty trays. So sometimes you get knocks at that door here. The only other thing that I have happen, and even my mom has experienced this a few times too, is sometimes when you're doing dishes, you'll actually see like somebody trying to pick up the towel, and sometimes they'll even like drop to the floor. It's almost like somebody's trying to help dry or something, is the only way I can explain it. The dining room, the best way we found to get activity in the dining room is just to sit at the table and just talk. Crack jokes, have a good time. And it usually attracts things in. I actually tell a lot of paranormal teams to try this sometime on your own. Divide your team in half, have them go to one room and do the stereotypical investigation. Send the other half to a different room and tell them just to hang out and have a good time. 9 times out of 10, the fun room gets more activity. Just think about it, which room would you want to go to? Do you know you're dead? Are you a boy? Are you a girl? Or, hey man, this priest and a rabbi walk into a bar. Think about it. And that works really well in the dining room. I don't know if it's my favorite story, but a couple of years with my paranormal friends, and it's in the middle of August. And this one particular year, we were down here, it was about 2:30 in the morning. I was sitting in this chair. Matthew was sitting in that chair. My friend Bowling Ball was sitting in this chair. His wife was in that chair. And we're sitting down here, it's about 2:30. We're just having coffee. Just talking. We start hearing these loud popping noises down here. Like some would come from the cafeteria, some would come from that back area over there. And then we heard a loud pop at the top of the stairs here. Well, I looked up to see what the pop was, and standing at the top of the stairs was Betty. And she was like kind of doing one of these kind of numbers where she's kind of leaning on the side. And what was most interesting about the way she appeared that time is she appeared so solid, I could actually see the pattern of her dress that she was wearing. So that was pretty cool. But right after that, then we get this blast of air that comes right down through here. And it wasn't just like a breeze. It was like a blast of air. And it was ice cold. And come August night, it's not that cool down here, especially that cold air. But the interesting part was, sorry Matthew, I hate to do this to you. Matthew's sitting here, he was in a line of fire of that air that went through, and he doesn't even know why, but he started crying for no reason. And he didn't even know why he was crying. And I've just seen sometimes when a spirit passes through you, it's almost like emotional, residual energy. Yeah, he was bawling like a little bitch for no reason. Not to embarrass you, but it was beyond her control.
It was a ghost that made me do it.
And with that, so this served as the cafeteria, plus it actually served as the gymnasium. So on bad weather days and things, they would actually, after lunch, they'd break down the tables and they'd push them off to one side. The kids could come in and rock out and blow off steam. The most common thing that people experience in the cafeteria is the footsteps. And whoever it is doesn't pick up their feet because it's a kind of a footstep. And 9 times out of 10 when you hear it, it's accompanied by whistling. It's almost like somebody's down here whistling while they work. Another thing that we have happen down here is sometimes you get these really strange flashes of light. Now the only way I can explain it to you, it's almost like a camera flash, but with no point of origin. It's almost like the room just pops with light. That's the only way I can explain it. You would not be able to tell which direction it was coming from. It's just like it comes from everywhere. I don't know how to explain it other than that. If any of you saw the episode of My Ghost Story about the school, those of you who didn't see that episode, they showed the picture of the shadow person. touching my mother.
Oh, that's crazy.
Oops, sorry. I know you're right by me.
Okay, now let me set this up for you. We were down here, and we were sweeping, cleaning up down here. My mom was about right where these speakers are, because this is the doorway that's in the picture. And she was right here, and she claimed she could feel somebody touching her shoulder. So she's like, "Do you have your phone on you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." She's like, "Quick, take a picture." And I took the picture, and that's what came out of the picture. Now, one thing I'm going to throw it out right away. A lot of skeptics try to debunk this photo. I'm going to address those things right now. The first thing they say is it must be somebody standing in the way of the camera flash creating a shadow. First of all, this picture was taken about 7 years ago on my Apple iPhone 3. For those of you who are not tech savvy, that means that I didn't have a camera flash. So then people will say, okay, well then it's obviously somebody alive in the room creating a shadow. Where do the shadows cast? This way. And the last thing I want to say, if this was a shadow created by a living being creating a shadow, then why do you see the shadow here? Because any shadow cast by a person would only be on the wall here and then cut off right here. You wouldn't see it here because it'd be gone and down the frickin' hallway. So if you can recreate it, you go for it.
The poker room.
Okay.
My favorite, one of my favorite rooms up here, besides the attic. This one here it is.
That's from the haunted house because we used to do a haunted house here every Halloween. This whole half of the basement on this side was the caretaker's. This is where all his tools would have been, his workbenches. This is where the furnaces were. This is where the coal room was for the furnaces. This is one of the storage rooms behind me. This was his space. He's still here. I lovingly call him the crabby old man. That's exactly what he is. Now, a lot of people want to jump to the fact that, oh my God, he swears and he curses and he pushes women around and oh my God, he must be the devil. Let me tell you something. When you become a ghost, you're exactly the same person you were in life. So if you're a sweet little old lady and you become a ghost, you're going to be a sweet little old lady ghost. If you're an asshole and you become a ghost, do the math. He does swear a lot, so if you get EVPs or even hear swearing, I'm sorry, that is Mike Ickner is his name. And the whole thing with women is he seems to mess with women. A lot of women have been pushed, shoved, felt things. Some people claim to have been strangled. I don't know if I believe it or not. But long story short, it's not that he's the devil, I don't think. You got to think of the time period. It was a man's world. He was doing the manly job. This was his space. And I really don't think he appreciates it when a woman comes into the man's space. I think it's more of that. It's that kind of mentality. He's not Satan himself, let me promise you. If he was a demon, I would know about it by now. I've been living here for 8 years. That lady that wrote that book and went on coast to coast and told the whole world that the portal of fucking hell is in my basement. Do you know how long I had to field off the crazies from that one? The storeroom behind me, I really got to get going because it's 11 o'clock, so I'm not going to get into all the stories or anything at this point. A lot of stuff does happen in this room. Matthew had an amazing experience in this room. If you want to talk to him about it later, you may choose to. But the boy about pissed himself, that's all I'm saying. So yeah, that was a really good one.
Awesome.
So I'll talk to him later so we can keep this moving for those of you who want to do stuff.
All night.
Coming through this way, first of all, if you see or hear those doors moving, that's not the wind. Those are those old fire doors. They're big, they're heavy, they're metal. They work on a weight and pulley system. So yeah, if those things move, that's not the wind. The pencil mark on the wall, What this is here for, when we were purchasing the building and we were doing the last walkthrough with the real estate agent, her name is Mary. We're still friends with her to this day. When we were doing the final walkthrough through the building, I was up ahead in this room over here. Mary was passing through this hallway here. She had her clipboard light to her chest, just like this, walking through this hallway. And when she got to this point, I just see her like oof, into the wall. And my honest to God, I thought, because there was so much crap in the building, I thought she had tripped over something and fell into the wall. So I'm like, Mary, are you okay? And her response was, no, I'm not okay. Somebody just pushed me. To this day, she claims she was pushed into the wall, and whenever she does come over for a visit, she will not come down to the basement. But remember where this location is to this air duct, because it plays into the next part. Into old stuff, they're super awesome in the fact that they're American foundry furnaces. And for us old geeks, back in the day, they were sought after for their furnaces because they make very ornate furnaces and people loved them. Well, in the World War, they got a contract with the Navy to design boilers for the new naval vessels we were building. The problem was is their engineers didn't factor in the differences between using fresh and salt water. So there was a lot of explosions on the ships, hurt some of our own boys, and back in the day when people actually supported our troops, that company went under overnight. So to have 2 American foundry furnaces in one place is pretty cool.